Hello there, and welcome to the least sophisticated bourbon review you'll probably ever watch. I am a single malt Scotch guy. I like the Islay expressions, very peaty, very smoky, and my wife insists that I become a bourbon expert, so we have selected four bourbons that are fairly well known. I myself have always liked Stagg Jr. because, what I look for in a whiskey, bourbon, Scotch, whatever, is some kind of a flavor journey. I like something that has a really compelling nose and, on the palate, it's not going to be one-dimensional. It's going to have an evolution of flavors and experiences. And most importantly, when I consume a whiskey, I like something that takes me back to a particular place or a memory or something like that. Like when you listen to one of your favorite songs and it, recalls a memory or something, I like my whiskeys to evoke that kind of emotion and feeling. And so that's why I like Stagg Jr. I feel like it's the most multi-dimensional bourbon I've ever tried. So we're going to line up here. We've got Russell's Reserve 13, which is basically unobtainium these days. We've got the 1792 barrel proof and Elijah Craig barrel proof as well, because these are all about, they're all similar barrel proof, kind of strong, powerful whiskeys. So let's give it a shot. I'm going to have my wife pour them out into A, B, C, and D. It's going to be a blind taste test. And don't expect anything sophisticated from me. I don't have the most sophisticated palate. I'll do my best to talk about what I taste, but you can see that some of these things are going to be neck pours. The bottles have just been opened, so what you might experience is probably going to be completely different than what I might experience. So this whole experience here is just my attempt at trying these different bourbons to see which ones I like. I'm going to rank them, and I'll see if I can pick out Stagg Jr., which I proclaim to be my favorite. So let's have the wife give them a pour, and I'll give them a taste, and I'll see how it all shakes out. So I'm going to leave the room while my wife does the pouring, but just so you can see, this is a brand new bottle of Russell's Reserve. Like I said, it's freshly opened. It's going to be a neck pour, and if you have a bottle that's been open for a couple of weeks or a month, you may have a totally different taste experience than me. I've seen somebody else review this, and they hated it, but then they left the bottle, half full for a month, and they came back and they loved it. So I'm going to give it my best shot with this fresh bottle here and see how that tastes. This Stagg Jr. is batch 15, which I've heard is probably one of the best Stagg Juniors ever created. I have only tasted this once, and I fell in love with Stagg Jr. in an older batch, probably I think maybe 12 or 13, something like that. So we'll see if I can pick out my favorite today. This 1792, as you can see, is a very full bottle as well. I honestly have never tasted this before, so it'll be my first experience with 1792. This Elijah Craig has been open for about a week now, and I first tried it when we got this batch 15 of Stagg Jr., and I preferred Stagg Jr. over this, even though they were very close. So I have a feeling I will be able to differentiate between the two. I'll know which one is Stagg Jr. So let's give the blind taste test a shot and see how we end up. Okay, I've got my lovely wife and dog here. She's going to do the pouring. She's going to go in A, B, C, and D. They are totally blind to me. I'm going to leave the room while she pours. We have what's going to be in A, B, C, and D written down here, and I'll do my best to taste them and explain what I'm feeling. And then afterwards, I'll take a look at the list and see how well or poorly I did. So go ahead and pour. I'm going to leave the room, and I'll see you in a bit. All right then, as you can see, the pours are complete. And just to give you a recap, the whole purpose we're doing this is for me to give you some utterly unsophisticated tasting notes and determine which of them I like the best, rank them 1 through 4, and see if I can pick out which one is my favorite Stagg Junior. So having a look here real quick, we can see that B seems to be the most darkly colored, which is utterly insignificant to me. I'm going to go ahead and give them a nose, and then I'm a big picture guy, so I'm going to go through all 4 of them. Just kind of taking that big picture. And by the way, these things have been sitting for about 10 minutes to sort of let that ethanol dissipate, so they're not as caustic as they might otherwise be. And one of the reasons why I like Scotch more than bourbon is because I tend to find that the particular Scotches that I like have a more interesting multi-dimensional nose and palate. I've always found bourbons to be sort of one-dimensional, and that may offend people, but so I'll try to give you some notes here along the way. Right off the top, they all have that very familiar, similar bourbon essence. I'm getting a more sweet sort of candy here on A. And honestly, not as big of a difference as I would have expected as I'm going through and nosing these things big picture. D here is the least potent nose of them all. Not sure why that is, but I'm just not getting anything vibrant out of D right now. C is a bit on the medicinal side. And again, D is the weakest of the bunch. Not really getting a lot out of this one. Let's give them a taste to see how they taste on the palate. Wow, B is really lighting me up. That right there is a journey. More vibrant and fruity compared to A, at least so far. So I'm going to let that linger a bit. Very, very punchy, fruity. I mean, it was just exponentially different from A there. Let's give C a shot. C kind of took some time to get there. So there was a little bit of a journey there, but not anywhere near as potent as B was. And this one was the least potent on the nose. Let's see how it tastes. Wow. Whew. D took a while to get there, but man, the nose is deceptively weak relative to the flavor. That one came in smooth and soft. But wow, it really kicked on towards the end there. So right now, B was in my face right off the bat, but it did evolve, which I like. D came in smooth, but then really kicked me in the ass on the finish. So I'm going to take a little bit of water here and go through and do cycle number 2 and see if anything changes. Okay, so I have taken some water, cleared the palate, and now my mouth is a little bit more attuned to the ethanol burn. So we're going to reverse it. We're going to go from D to A and see if I have the similar experience. Again, the nose is very underwhelming on this one, but, you know, reasonable, pleasant. It's a bourbon. On the palate, that one is very buttery, thick, viscous. Moving to C. Wow, it's funny, the nose reminds me of something, but I'm not articulate enough to convey what that smell is or what it means to me. I want to say it's kind of a caramel sort of smell, but that one's nutty. Definitely some nutty overtones, not as viscous. Interestingly, B on the second time around is far less aggressive and wild than it was the first time. So that's surprising. Move along to A here. I think this is the sweetest nose of the bunch. A's not doing it for me. That's nothing supernatural about that. There's no real journey, no drama. It's kind of flat. A little bit nutty on the finish. Okay, we're going to clear it out, and we'll do round 3. And then I'll let you know what I like best and what I think is the Stagg Junior. Okay, everything's cleared out. Let's go ahead with round 3 here. I'll start back from A to D. And actually, you know what? I'm just going to go through the noses again. Big picture here. And it's interesting, the third time around, the longer these things have been in the glass, it almost seems like things start to normalize a bit. And it's even less obvious which one is which. One more pass on the nose. Interesting. C is jumping off on the nose for me here. Very sweet, kind of a confectionery sort of experience there. And D's nose is still really flat. It was surprising to me that it was such a powerful palate, given that the nose was so flat. Okay, going in for a taste on A again. A has kind of a light mouthfeel, not taking me on any kind of an interesting ride. Fairly one-dimensional. Here's B. I'm leaning very heavily towards thinking that B is Stagg Junior. That has been the most consistently interesting relative to the others. And that finish just kept going. There was a lot of interesting experiences throughout the finish of that. Wow. The nose of C continually catches my attention. I'm not articulate enough to express why it's catching my attention, but it's definitely a desirable nose for sure. It's very mild, very smooth, very drinkable. But again, it doesn't have the drama that B has. The finish has definitely got nutty overtones. So all in all, I think C is probably the most drinkable of the bunch because the nose catches my attention the most and is most pleasing, I think. Most interesting and appealing. And the palate isn't distasteful. It's pleasant. Nothing jumps off at me as being obviously vanilla or obviously cinnamon. It's just a nice, pleasing experience, but again, one-dimensional. And that's what I've come to expect from bourbons. Wow. So D is really sucking the moisture out of my mouth. It's got that kind of tannin effect. Very dry. And it's potent, so conceivably less drinkable than C would be. Maybe more offensive to people who don't like the higher proof whiskeys. The finish keeps going. More of a burn than anything else. I wouldn't say there's anything exciting from a flavor perspective going in the finish. So if I'm going to rank these, I'm going to go B, C, A, D. That's my favorite. B, C, A, D. That's my preference. And I'm going to go ahead and pick B as Stagg Junior. Let's go check the results. I've been given the sealed envelope here of results. Let's see what we got. Fascinating. Oh my gosh. The one that I like the best is Elijah Craig Barrel Proof. The one that I like second best is the Russell's Reserve 13. The one that I like third is 1792 Full Proof. And amazingly enough, Stagg Junior is in last place. And that's shocking to me because I've always felt that Stagg Junior was my favorite. So this is really interesting to me. And when I first tried the Elijah Craig Barrel Proof against the Stagg Junior in the hotel when we bought them, for me, the nose on the Elijah Craig had kind of a vegetation sort of nose to it, whereas Stagg Junior was more fruity, sweet, like I would have expected. So this turned me off a little bit. And now that I know, let's nose them and see if my opinion changes now that I know. You know, they're close enough that it's almost a toss-up. This one still has a stronger nose, I think, than the Stagg does. 1792 is probably the most fruity, I think, of all of them for me. And Russell Reserve, I think, is the most nutty. I don't know that I mentioned that. I think I did. I think I mentioned that the finish was kind of nutty. Interesting. So all in all, you can see that in a blind taste test, the results can be unexpected. And you know what's interesting is the Elijah Craig, when I first tried it, was freshly opened with a neck pour, whereas here it's been sitting open for about a week or so. So take that for what it's worth. If you want to have the Elijah Craig barrel proof, go ahead and open it up, let it sit for a week or so, because that might, infuse a little bit more interesting flavor to it. So I learned something from this. Hopefully you did. And again, like I said, my palate and my opinions are utterly ignorant. So take that for what it's worth. I'm a layman experimenting with bourbons, kind of that I've never tried before for the first time. And I have learned that Elijah Craig Barrel Proof is my number one pick. And Russell Reserve 13 is my number 2 pick. So it's as good as they say. It blew Stagg Junior out of the water. And interestingly enough, what I'm going to do after this video is I'm going to compare and contrast the earlier batch of Stagg Junior that I fell in love with first and compare that against this batch 15 of Stagg Junior and see if there's any significant difference between the older version and this newer batch 15. So again, hopefully you learned something. Give it a try yourself if you can find any of these things, and leave me a comment below and let me know what you think.